What's up, everybody? Max from MaksWerks here, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So up to now you've seen me restore bikes, bring them back, sell them, stuff like that, and we've talked a little bit about all that. But today we're going to be talking about how you strip a bike for parts and maximize profit when you sell those parts. And what I have here is a 2003 Harley XL883, basically the 883 100th anniversary edition. And I picked this bike up for about $250. And this engine, just as an 883, actually retails for anywhere from $800 to $1,200 on eBay, just for the engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the engine running to make a video and prove that the engine in fact does run. And if we can, then we'll go through and strip everything down as it's supposed to be. This bike was in a really horrible front-end collision. And so the forks, the front wheel, I'll show you guys in a minute, they're all destroyed. So they're all going straight to the garbage pile. But after we get it running, we'll figure out. I actually brought this back on the trailer. This bike weighs approximately 1 billion pounds. And I actually had to drag it off the trailer onto this dolly myself when I got home. And by the way, if you're going to be doing this, these dollies, these are awesome for stuff like this. You can just set the frame on it and go. So let's take a look at the motor and see where we're at and see if we can get it running again. So the first step, I took a look back here. This is the oil back here, and you can actually see that there's still oil in this bike. And if there's some in the sump, there's going to be some in the motor. So I don't have to worry about that too much as of yet. So then I started taking off this to get the carburetor off, because chances are after 5 years, this carburetor needs a little bit of cleanup before we can try to test fire this thing. And it turns out it has a K&N air filter in it, and even this air filter weighs like 5 pounds. Like, I'm not even joking. Everything on this bike is extraordinarily heavy. So I guess we got to take off this cover, and then we can get the carburetor out and get it cleaned up on the bench. So there's our carburetor. It's probably like a BST-40 or something of that nature, but it just slides right off. And here is the unsecured choke, and then here's our fuel line. And we're actually going to run this fuel line into a plastic bottle full of gas as a dummy tank. But first I got to take off these throttle cables right here, so we can get this on the bench and go through it a little bit. Incredibly, this thing had 5-year-old gas in there, looking a lot more like varnish. There you can see it, it's all nasty and yellow, and I mean, it's oxidized gasoline. There's no way around it. But interestingly enough, this looks almost exactly like a BST-40 carb. But as you can see, it's Harley Davidson. So, general carb procedure. The only difference is this cap up here has these little bronze pieces that's sitting there to guide the screws, and they like to fall out, so keep an eye on them. So we're actually going to start with the bowl, because that tends to be the nastiest, dirtiest spot. And we're actually going to take the bowl off, figure out how many screws right here are on the fuel air screw, how much is supposed to be turned in, and then take this all apart. There you go. You can see just how gross and nasty and grody that is. So we're going to get all this cleaned up, get the jets all cleaned out, and get this thing back together, ready to go back on the bike. So here's kind of a comparison. Here's a part I've cleaned with a bronze wire brush, and then here's the main jet that I haven't cleaned, and you can just see that that is all gummed up. This carb is really in pretty sad shape, but it's about appropriate for 5 years sitting with gas carb, so we should be able to get this cleaned up in no time. It's always important to make sure you take this out, the float stop, because in this case it was actually jammed in there solid with gunk and stuff, so it was actually completely caked in there, so no fuel would have been able to get into the bowls. And also make sure you take these off, inspect them, clean them. Make sure you clean everything. Don't skip any steps when you're taking carbs apart, because it's usually a pain in the butt, and like, you never want to have to do it twice. You also want to make sure that you clean out the accelerator pump right here, because it's going to make all the difference when it comes to revving. Obviously, this bike, it's not as big of a deal because nobody's going to be revving it, at least until it goes into a new bike. But you still want to take all this shit out and clean it up because, as you can see, it's just covered in gunk. So now that we got the bottom of the carb all set up, we get to take the cover off and take a look at the needle. And chances are the needle is as gummed up as everything else is. But also remember, up here we have a spring up under this plastic black cap, so that when you take this all apart, just remember that last screw you take off, otherwise this is going to come all flying apart. So there we go, all the screws are out, we can safely remove this cap. And remove this right here. This inside part's not too bad, it's usually just a little bit of dirt. We're going to clean everything out, and then this is a needle cap. And then the needle itself just pops right out. And you can see it's also pretty grimy and grungy, and we're going to clean all this up. There we go. Rags to riches. Now we can just reassemble it. And after we get the bike running, this thing on its own will fetch a decent price sold separately. So now we got the carburetor back on. This bike did not have a key. And so I had to bypass the ignition. And generally, I will never ever in a video talk about or explain how to bypass an ignition for obvious reasons. However, if you have a Harley, I really hope you have extra security, because apparently these ignitions only have 3 wires and they don't have any of the modern security protocols in it. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But now I haven't hooked up the gas yet, but you can just basically see if I hit the starter button, she cranks and starts. So we're going to get a little gas fed up into the carburetor, and I'm going to show you how to do that, and then we're going to see if we can get this baby fired up. So generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to find a drill bit that's about the same size as, slightly less than the outside diameter of the fuel line. You drill a hole in a bottle cap, so like a bottle like this one, fill this with gas, then when we screw this together, we pump the hose through and turn this upside down, and this will actually act like a little gas tank, and we'll see if we can get this bike started up. So you can see a little piggyback tank here, and let's see what happens. As you see the bike, I put a little starter fluid in there, but the bike fired up pretty good. Make sure our choke is out. Give it another go real quick. So it took me a little bit over an hour to get this bike all up and running, but we've added so much value to the bottom line here, because now we can prove that the bike runs and works. And one thing, when you do this, in the last bit, you probably saw there was a crap ton of smoke in the garage. That was not from the exhaust. That was actually from the back tire spinning against the masonite. Apparently I was still in gear. So that's bad. Don't leave the bike in gear when the rear tire is touching the floor and you're trying to get it to run. So just a thought. So now we're going to just go through piece by piece and start removing stuff until we can pull the engine out, clean everything up, take pictures, and move it into storage. So one of the other things you want to do is you want to have gray plastic buckets or something, because a lot of this stuff is junk and it's just not worth anything to sell. So we want to make sure that if you have steel and stuff like that, take it to a recycler. My thing on recyclers, you can take it to a for-profit recycler where they'll pay you by the pound, but they're generally terrible, horrible, shitty-ass people, and they try to Jew you on everything just to the point where it's just annoying for like $5. So in general, most cities have recycle centers where you can basically just dump stuff straight, and they'll sort it for you, take care of everything for you, and that's all there is to it. So that said, I always prefer to take old parts and stuff there and just let them sort it out. Another important business side aspect of parting out bikes is you want to have a nice, clean, well-lit area to take your pictures. So every item that I'm going to sell separately will first get cleaned, and then will make its way up on this table, get photographed, and then be put away for storage. Another thing I want to have a quick word about is camera equipment. So this is a Canon Rebel XS. It's my garage camera that I use for all my projects and for eBay and stuff. This is a standard 1855 auto-stable lens that came as a kit. I bought everything separately, but this is a Canon kit lens. This whole thing with an SD card, between $150 and $300 on eBay. You don't need, so I don't like taking cell phone pics, I don't think they're good enough, but you don't need a $5,000 camera setup to take pictures of bike parts. I would say about 200 bucks, get a good DSLR, used one on eBay or something like that, and that'll set you up for as long as you need it. As far as cleaning parts for taking pictures, I use a couple things. First of all, old rags, you can buy these at Costco. It's about $7 for like 40 of them, and I just use it for everything. Brake cleaner obviously works great for engine, mechanical parts, stuff like that. This stuff right here is called Gary Dean's Detail Juice, and if you detail cars a lot, or motorcycles, you're going to know what this stuff is. I dilute it 24 ounces to 1 right here in this spray bottle. It's great for any frame, body parts, shocks, stuff like that. You spray it down, wipe it down, it gives it a nice rich luster without being very time consuming. So that's real quick and easy, and this is what I use to clean stuff before I take pictures. One of the things that can happen sometimes in one of these front end collisions is that you end up having to chop the frame off because it was just jammed up under the engine. Plus, a lot of times if you don't care, you're going to have to chop up the frame anyway for recycling. And so sometimes it's just easier to just start going at it with a hacksaw. So the most important thing in this business is results. So let's take a look at the results. Here there was a Harley Davidson on a ramp, and now you can see that the space is empty. So what did we produce? First of all, we produced this beast. So this engine, since I could prove that it runs, will retail somewhere between $800 and $1,200. In the past, I've always had luck shipping engines, but this actually weighs probably close to 250 pounds. It took quite a bit of effort for me to pick it up by myself and put it up there, and it's going to stay there until somebody buys it. In addition to that, this is pretty much all that was left. All the little pieces go in here. We got shocks and whatnot. The rear wheel with the sprocket, the axle, the tire's junk. We got our rear fender and our Super Trap exhaust, which is damaged, but the end pipe is really, really clean. So this is a total result. Like I said, I paid 250 bucks for this bike, and I would like to see at least $1,000 in profit out of it. So, in one of my, if you keep watching my vlogs, you'll see one of my vlogs. I'll later on, once we get all this stuff sold, I'll mention how we did on the whole project. And anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and as always guys, ride safe.